A worn leather wallet hits the checkered linoleum floor of a roadside diner. A forgotten photograph flutters out, landing face up under the harsh fluorescent lights. For 24-year-old waitress Mia Evans, that single faded image of her long-dead mother was about to unravel a lifetime of lies, expose a billionaire's darkest secret, and reveal a truth more shattering than she could ever imagine. This wasn't just a picture, it was a key to a past she never knew she had. A past that began with a simple, terrifying question. Why was her mother's picture in the wallet of the richest, most powerful man in the city? The Gilded Spoon wasn't gilded at all. It was a classic American diner off Route 17 in upstate New York, a place where the chrome was peeling and the vinyl on the booth seats was cracked like old leather. For Mia Evans, it was both a sanctuary and a prison. It paid her rent for the tiny apartment she shared with two other girls. It kept her car running, mostly. And it was the one place where the constant, simmering grief for a mother she barely remembered was drowned out by the sizzle of bacon and the clatter of ceramic plates. Mia moved with an efficiency born of 5 years of practice. She could balance 3 plates on one arm, take 4 orders at once, and refill a coffee cup without breaking conversation. Tonight, a Tuesday, was predictably slow. A few truckers nursing coffees, a young couple whispering in a corner booth, and the man who had just walked in. He was different. Everyone who walked into the Gilded Spoon was either passing through or had nowhere else to go. This man looked like he owned the road, the diner, and the entire county it sat on. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Mia's car, a crisp white shirt, and no tie. His hair was silver at the temples, and his face was a mask of controlled indifference, etched with lines that spoke of billion-dollar decisions and sleepless nights. He didn't look at the menu. He just sat in the farthest booth, staring out the window at the darkening sky. Mia grabbed a menu, a glass of water, and her notepad. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. Can I start you off with something to drink?" she asked, her voice practiced and polite. He turned his gaze from the window to her, and for a second Mia felt pinned. His eyes were a startlingly pale blue, and they held a weariness that seemed ancient. "Black coffee," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. It was a voice accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Coming right up," she chirped, forcing a smile. She brought him the coffee and he ordered a simple club sandwich, no fries. He ate with a slow, deliberate precision, never once looking at his phone. He just sat, lost in thought, a solitary island of immense wealth in a sea of formica and fluorescent light. Mia's life was a collection of carefully managed routines. Work, sleep, pay bills, and on Sundays visit her father, Robert Evans, in the small house on Oak Street where she'd grown up. Robert was a good man, a retired mechanic whose hands were permanently stained with the ghost of motor oil. He had raised her alone after her mother, Eleanor, had died in a car accident when Mia was just 4. Her mother existed for her only in fragments. The faint scent of lavender her father said she used to wear, the lullaby he hummed that he claimed was Eleanor's favorite, and the single photograph Mia kept in a silver locket around her neck. It was a small, oval picture of a beautiful young woman with kind, smiling eyes and a cascade of dark hair, the same hair Mia saw in her own reflection. It was her most precious possession, the only tangible link to the woman who gave her life. The man in the booth finished his sandwich. He motioned for the check, and Mia brought it over. He didn't even glance at the total. He pulled a wallet from the inside pocket of his suit jacket. It was exquisite, made of dark, supple leather. As he opened it to pull out a credit card, his movements were stiff, almost pained. The wallet slipped from his grasp, falling to the floor. "Oh, let me get that for you," Mia said, instinctively bending down. The wallet had fallen open. Credit cards, a driver's license, and a thick fold of cash were visible. But that's not what made Mia's breath catch in her throat. Tucked into a clear plastic sleeve, opposite the driver's license, was a photograph. A small, rectangular, slightly faded photograph of a beautiful young woman with kind, smiling eyes and a cascade of dark hair. It was her mother. It wasn't a similar picture. It was the exact same photo from her locket, just a larger, uncropped version. The same soft smile, the same light in her eyes, the same white summer dress she wore in Mia's locket. The world around Mia dissolved. The clatter of the diner, the low hum of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of a truck on the highway, it all faded into a deafening roar in her ears. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This was impossible. How could this man, this stranger, this titan of industry, have a picture of her mother tucked away in his wallet as if it were the most normal thing in the world? The man was reaching down, but Mia was faster. Her hand, trembling, closed over the photograph. She stood up, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and confusion, and held it out to him. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man's mask of indifference shattered. His pale blue eyes widened, and a storm of emotions, shock, pain, and something that looked terrifyingly like recognition, flashed across his face. He looked from the photo in her trembling hand to her face, his gaze lingering on her eyes, her hair the shape of her jaw. That's none of your business," he stammered, his composure gone. He reached for the photo, but Mia pulled it back. "This is my mother," she said, her voice gaining strength, fueled by a surge of protective adrenaline. "Her name was Eleanor Evans. Why do you have her picture?" The man stood up abruptly, his tall frame towering over her. He looked cornered, like a powerful animal suddenly caught in a trap. He glanced around the diner, but no one was paying attention. He dropped a $100 bill on the table, more than enough to cover the check. "You're mistaken," he said, his voice cold and sharp again, the mask slamming back into place. "Forget you saw anything." He turned and walked out of the diner, leaving his wallet, his credit card, and the $100 bill on the table. He didn't look back. Mia stood frozen, the photograph clutched in her hand, her world tilted on its axis. On the driver's license he'd left behind, she could clearly read the name, Julian Davenport. Mia stood paralyzed for a full minute, the photograph a burning ember in her hand. Julian Davenport. The name echoed in the vast, empty space that had just opened up in her mind. It wasn't just any name. Even in her small corner of the world, she knew it. Davenport Industries was a titan of technology and finance, a global empire with its name on skyscrapers and in headlines. Julian Davenport was its reclusive, enigmatic founder, a billionaire who guarded his privacy with a ferocity that was legendary, and he had her mother's picture in his wallet. Her shift ended in a blur. She packed up her things, pocketed the $100 bill, her mind too numb to process the absurdity of it, and slipped his wallet and the precious, terrifying photograph into her purse. Driving home, every traffic light, every turn of the wheel felt surreal. Her reality had been a simple, if sometimes difficult, narrative. A loving father, a mother lost too soon, a life of hard work and quiet dreams. Now a single photograph had set that narrative on fire. Back in her cramped apartment, her roommates were asleep. In the quiet of her small room, she took out the photo in her locket. She placed them side by side on her worn wooden desk. They were identical. Eleanor's smile was a beacon of warmth in both, but now it seemed to hold a secret, a story Mia had never been told. Who was Julian Davenport to her mother? An old friend? A distant relative? The questions were a swarm of angry bees in her head. Her father had always described her mother as a simple woman, a local girl who loved to paint and read poetry. He never mentioned powerful billionaires. He never mentioned anyone named Julian. Her first instinct, the one that screamed with the urgency of a fire alarm, was to call her dad. But she hesitated. Her father, Robert, was her rock, but the topic of her mother was his one great vulnerability. Whenever Mia pushed for more details about Eleanor's life before him, before the marriage, before the accident, he would shut down. His jovial face would cloud over, his eyes would grow distant, and he would change the subject. "It's too painful, Mia Bear," he'd say. "Let's just remember the good times we had." But what if the good times were built on a foundation of secrets? Sleep was impossible. The next morning, fueled by coffee and a gnawing anxiety, Mia made a decision. She couldn't confront her father yet, not until she had more than just a photograph and a wild assumption. She needed facts. She sat at her laptop and typed Julian Davenport into the search bar. The internet exploded with information. Articles from Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, profiles in business magazines. He was 58 years old, a self-made man who had built his empire from a small tech startup in the late 1980s. He was known for his ruthless business acumen and his obsessive privacy. There were pictures of him ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, shaking hands with world leaders, and stepping out of private jets. In every photo, he had the same guarded, impenetrable expression she had seen in the diner. She dug deeper, searching for his personal life. The articles were sparse. He had never been married, no children. His philanthropy was extensive but always anonymous. He was a ghost, a man made of money and shadows. She tried searching Julian Davenport and Eleanor Evans. Nothing. Eleanor Vance, her mother's maiden name. Still nothing. It was a digital dead end. Defeated, she stared at the wallet on her desk. It was an intimate object, a window into a man's life. Against her better judgment, she opened it again. Inside, behind his driver's license, was a small folded piece of paper. It was old, the creases soft and worn. She carefully unfolded it. It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, from the Syracuse Post-Standard, dated October 26, 1999. The headline was small, a local news brief. Local artist wins acclaim at Fall Arts Festival. There was a black and white photo of a group of artists standing by their work, and there on the far right was a young woman with a familiar smile and a cascade of dark hair. Eleanor. Beneath the photo, the caption listed the names. Eleanor Vance, second prize for her oil painting, Hudson Twilight. But it was the name next to hers that made Mia's blood run cold. And Julian Davenport, honorable mention for his photography collection, City of Steel and Glass. Mia's hands trembled as she read the words again. Julian Davenport, honorable mention, photography. He wasn't just some powerful man who somehow knew her mother. They were artists. They had moved in the same circles. They had stood side by side, smiling for a newspaper photographer, their futures stretching out before them, one to become a local tragedy, the other a global phenomenon. This changed everything. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a connection, a deep, hidden connection that her father had never once mentioned. The carefully constructed image of her parents' simple love story began to crumble, and Mia felt a terrifying sense of vertigo, as if the ground beneath her feet was falling away. She had to see her father. Now. She drove the 40 minutes to his house in a daze. The familiar sights of her hometown, the corner store, the old movie theater, the park where he'd taught her to ride a bike, all seemed alien, props on a stage set for a play whose script she was just now discovering. Robert was in his garage, tinkering with a lawnmower engine, a grease-stained rag in his hand. He smiled when he saw her, his tired eyes lighting up. Mia, Bear, what a surprise. Everything okay? Mia couldn't bring herself to smile back. She held out the newspaper clipping. Dad, I need you to tell me the truth. Robert took the clipping, his brow furrowing in confusion as he squinted at the faded print. His eyes found the picture, then the names. The color drained from his face. The greasy rag fell from his hand, landing silently on the concrete floor. Where did you get this? He asked, his voice a choked whisper. A man came into the diner last night, Mia said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. His name is Julian Davenport. He had this. She pulled the photograph of her mother from her pocket and held it up. Robert stared at the photo of his late wife, his face a canvas of pure anguish. He looked like he'd been struck. He stumbled back, leaning against his workbench for support. Dad, Mia pressed, her heart breaking at his reaction, but determined to get answers. Who is he? Who was he to Mom? Robert shook his head, his eyes squeezed shut as if trying to block out a painful memory. You should have left it alone, Mia. Some things are better left buried. I can't, she cried, the frustration and confusion of the last 24 hours boiling over. He had her picture in his wallet like he's been carrying it around for 25 years. He was one of her friends, an artist, and you never ever mentioned his name to me. Why? What are you hiding? I'm not hiding anything, he snapped, his voice rough with a pain she had never heard before. I'm protecting you. Protecting me from what? She yelled back, tears welling in her eyes. From the truth about my own mother? I have a right to know. Robert looked at her, his expression broken. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just shook his head again, a silent, desperate plea for her to stop. Then he turned his back on her, picked up the rag, and began furiously, pointlessly wiping at the clean lawnmower engine. The silence that followed was heavier and more painful than any argument. Mia knew she had broken something between them, pushed past a boundary he had spent her entire life reinforcing, but she also knew she couldn't go back. The thread had been pulled, and the entire tapestry of her life was beginning to unravel. Leaving her father's house felt like tearing a part of herself away. The image of his back, rigid with unspoken secrets, was seared into her mind. The man who had been her source of all truth was now the keeper of a profound lie. The anger that had fueled her drive to his house had cooled into a hollow ache of betrayal. For 2 days, Mia existed in a fog. She went to work at the diner, going through the motions with a mechanical detachment. Every customer who walked in made her heart leap, half expecting to see Julian Davenport's imposing figure in the doorway again. She checked her phone constantly, a knot of dread and anticipation in her stomach. Would he try to contact her? Did he want his wallet back? Or was he content to disappear, leaving her to grapple with the chaos he had unleashed? Her best friend Sarah, a nursing student with a no-nonsense attitude, tried to break through her shell. "Mia, talk to me," she said, cornering her after their shift. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Mia finally broke down, pouring out the whole story in a torrent of whispered words in the diner's empty parking lot. She showed Sarah the picture, the wallet, the newspaper clipping. Sarah listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Wow," she breathed when Mia finished. "Okay, this is big. A billionaire artist who knew your mom and a dad who's acting like the CIA. You can't just let this go." "I know," Mia whispered, wiping her eyes. "But what do I do? My dad won't talk to me. And this Davenport guy, he's untouchable." "No one is untouchable," Sarah said firmly. "His wallet is your leverage. His driver's license has an address on it, right?" Mia had already looked. The address was for a penthouse apartment on Park Avenue in Manhattan, a world away from her life. "Sarah, I can't just show up at a billionaire's penthouse in New York City." "Maybe you don't have to," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with an idea. "You have his wallet. He's going to need it back. He'll have to come to you." Sarah's logic was sound, but the waiting was excruciating. Every ring of her phone sent a jolt of anxiety through her. The call came on the 3rd day. It was an unknown number with a 212 area code. Her hand was shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. "Hello," she answered, her voice small. "Am I speaking with Mia Evans?" The voice on the other end was male, crisp, and professional. It was not Julian Davenport. "Yes, this is she. My name is Arthur Lexington. I am an attorney representing Mr. Julian Davenport. It has come to our attention that you are in possession of some of his personal property." The formal, sterile language sent a chill down her spine. He left his wallet at my work," Mia stammered. "Indeed," Lexington said smoothly. "Mr. Davenport is a very private individual and is keen to have the matter resolved quickly and discreetly. He has authorized me to make you an offer to facilitate the return of his property and to compensate you for your discretion." "An offer?" Mia was confused. "He can just come and get it." "That will not be necessary," the lawyer replied. "Mr. Davenport is prepared to offer you the sum of $50,000. Mia choked. $50,000 for returning a wallet? "The sum is not merely for the wallet, Ms. Evans. It is for your complete and total silence on the matter. You will return the wallet and all of its contents to me, and you will sign a non-disclosure agreement promising to never speak of Mr. Davenport, his connection to your family, or the circumstances of your meeting ever again." $50,000. The number was staggering. It was more money than she had ever seen. It would pay off her student loans. It would be a down payment on a small house for her and her dad. It would be a new car, a life without the constant, grinding worry about making rent. It was an escape hatch from the life she was living, and all she had to do was give up the one thing that now mattered more than anything: the truth. The offer was an insult. It was a clear and brutal message. Your mother's memory, your history, your identity, it all has a price, and I can afford it. The hurt she felt from her father's silence was nothing compared to the cold fury that now washed over her. "No," Mia said, her voice suddenly clear and steady. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Arthur Lexington was clearly not used to hearing that word. "I'm sorry, I don't think I heard you correctly." "I said no," Mia repeated, standing up straighter. "I don't want your client's money. I want answers. I want to talk to him, face to face." "Ms. Evans, I would strongly advise you to reconsider," Lexington said, a hint of steel in his voice. "Mr. Davenport is not a man who appreciates complications." "And I'm not a girl who can be bought off," Mia shot back, her heart pounding with a newfound courage. "Tell Mr. Davenport that if he wants his wallet back, and if he wants that photograph back, he will meet with me. He knows where to find me. Otherwise, I'm sure the New York Post would be very interested in a story about a reclusive billionaire with a secret past." It was a bluff, a wild and reckless gamble. She would never actually go to the press, but the threat hung in the air, electric and dangerous. Another long pause. She could almost hear the lawyer calculating, recalibrating. "I will relay your message," he finally said, his tone clipped and cold. Then he hung up. Mia leaned against the wall, her legs feeling like jelly. She had just gone to war with Julian Davenport. She had no money, no power, no influence. All she had was a photograph and a desperate need to know who her mother really was. She had no idea if her gamble would pay off or if she had just invited a wrath she couldn't possibly withstand. But for the first time since she saw that photograph, she didn't feel like a victim of circumstance. She felt like she was finally in control. The wait for his next move would be terrifying, but it was a fight she was now determined to see through to the end. The call came the next evening. It was Arthur Lexington again, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Miss Evans, Mr. Davenport has agreed to a meeting. Tomorrow, 11 a.m., his office." He gave her the address, a skyscraper on 6th Avenue that was the headquarters of the Davenport Industries global empire. "A car will be waiting for you at 9. Do not be late." The line went dead before she could respond. Mia felt a surge of both terror and triumph. Her bluff had worked. She was about to step into the lion's den. The next morning, a sleek black town car, the kind she'd only seen in movies, was waiting outside her apartment building precisely at 9 a.m. The ride into Manhattan was silent and surreal. She watched the familiar landscape of her life recede, replaced by the towering steel and glass canyons of a world she didn't belong to. She clutched her purse, the wallet inside feeling like a talisman. The Davenport Tower was an architectural marvel, a shard of obsidian piercing the sky. The lobby was a cavern of marble and polished chrome, echoing with the quiet, purposeful footsteps of people in expensive suits. Mia, in her best pair of jeans and a simple blue blouse, felt completely out of place. A severe-looking woman at the main desk was already expecting her. Without a word, she was escorted to a private elevator that shot upwards with breathtaking speed. The doors opened directly into a reception area on the 80th floor. The entire space was minimalist and cold, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a godlike view of the city below. Arthur Lexington met her there. He was as polished and severe as his voice, with a slim build and an unreadable expression. "Ms. Evans, this way." He led her to a pair of enormous oak doors and opened one for her. "Mr. Davenport will be with you shortly." She stepped inside. The office was vast, larger than her entire apartment. One wall was a solid pane of glass overlooking Central Park. The other walls were lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. There was no clutter, no personal photos, only a large abstract painting that seemed to swirl with dark, turbulent colors. In the center of the room was a massive desk of dark, polished wood, as imposing as a judge's bench. Mia stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, feeling small and insignificant. A few minutes later, a side door opened and Julian Davenport walked in. He was dressed more casually than he had been in the diner, in dark slacks and a gray cashmere sweater. He looked older in the daylight, the lines on his face deeper. He didn't look at her at first. He walked to a small bar in the corner and poured 2 glasses of water, his hands steady. He placed one on a small table between 2 leather armchairs. "Please sit," he said, his voice quiet but resonant in the large room. Mia sat on the edge of the armchair, her back ramrod straight. He took the seat opposite her. The massive desk was behind him, a fortress at his back. He looked at her then, his pale blue eyes holding the same haunted expression she remembered. "You have something of mine." Mia reached into her purse and placed the wallet on the table between them. She kept her hand on it. "I have questions." Davenport sighed, a long, weary sound. He ran a hand through his silvering hair. "I imagined this moment for 25 years. I just never imagined it would be like this." He looked directly at her and his gaze was so intense it felt like he was looking into her soul. "You have her eyes." The personal comment caught her off guard. "Who was she to you?" Mia asked, her voice trembling slightly. He was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the city below. "Eleanor Vance," he said, speaking her maiden name with a strange reverence. "She was everything. Before all this." He gestured vaguely at the opulent office, the city skyline. "Before the money and the noise." He began to speak, and the story he told was like a novel from another time. They had met at a community art class in Syracuse. He was a struggling photographer with dreams of capturing the stark beauty of industrial landscapes. She was a painter who could find vibrant life on a canvas where others saw nothing. They were young, ambitious, and wildly in love. "We were going to take on the world," he said, a faint, sad smile on his lips. "We lived in a tiny, drafty apartment, survived on cheap wine and instant noodles, and we were the happiest I have ever been." "That picture," he nodded toward the wallet, "I took that one afternoon in Green Lakes State Park. She was so full of life. She practically vibrated with it." He painted a vivid picture of her mother that Mia had never known, a woman who was fierce, funny and passionate, a woman who believed in his talent more than he did. "What happened?" Mia pressed, her heart aching for this version of her mother she was only just meeting. "My father. He's in our life. You're not." "Why?" Davenport's expression hardened. The softness vanished, replaced by a bitter resentment. "Robert happened," he said, his voice laced with a cold anger that had clearly not faded with time. "He was always there, on the periphery, the dependable friend, the safe choice. He was in love with her, of course. We all were." He leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. "I started to get some recognition for my work. A gallery in Soho wanted to represent me. It was my big break. I asked Eleanor to come with me to New York, to build our life here. And she hesitated. Why? Because of him, Davenport spat, the name like poison on his tongue. Robert Evans. He'd been whispering in her ear, telling her I was a dreamer, that I couldn't provide for her, that the city would chew me up and spit me out. He preyed on her insecurities. He convinced her that a quiet, stable life with him was better than a risky, passionate life with me. He stood up and began to pace, his coiled energy filling the room. I gave her an ultimatum, him or me, our dream or his suffocating safety. She cried, we fought, and in the end, she chose him. She stayed in Syracuse and married your father. She broke my heart, Mia. She shattered it into a million pieces. I never spoke to her again. That photograph is all I have left of the woman I loved. The story settled over Mia with a suffocating weight. It was plausible. It was heartbreaking. It painted her father, her quiet, steady father, as a jealous manipulator who had stolen her mother's chance at a different life. It explained his silence, his shame, his refusal to speak of the past. Mia felt sick. The image of her father, her hero, was twisting into something ugly and unrecognizable. Had her entire life been predicated on his selfish act? Had he lied to her every single day, not to protect her, but to protect himself from the truth of what he'd done? She looked at Julian Davenport, a man who had lost the love of his life and built an empty empire on the ashes of his heartbreak. She saw the genuine pain in his eyes. Slowly, she pushed the wallet across the table toward him. The fight went out of her, replaced by a profound and devastating sadness. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not just to him, but to the memory of her mother. Davenport picked up the wallet and opened it, his fingers tracing the plastic over Eleanor's smiling face. "Now you know," he said softly. "The choice is yours. You can accept my lawyer's original offer as an apology for the distress this has caused. $50,000, or you can walk away with nothing but this sad story." The offer was still there, but it wasn't hush money anymore. It was, in his eyes, a form of restitution, a way to give her a piece of the life her mother had supposedly thrown away. Dazed and heartbroken, Mia stared at the man who claimed to be her mother's one true love, her mind reeling from a truth that was far worse than she could have ever imagined. The drive back upstate was a silent torment. Julian Davenport's story echoed in Mia's mind, each word a chisel chipping away at the foundation of her life. The man she had called Dad, the man who had tucked her in at night, bandaged her scraped knees, and worked his fingers to the bone for her, was a stranger, a villain in a tragic love story. She didn't go home. She drove straight to her father's house on Oak Street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the familiar lawn. She found him in the living room, sitting in his old armchair, staring at a blank television screen. He looked like he hadn't moved in days. He saw her in the doorway, and the hope that flickered in his eyes died when he saw her expression. "You saw him," Robert said. It wasn't a question. Mia stood in the middle of the room, her arms wrapped around herself. "He told me everything." Robert flinched. He looked smaller in his chair, older. "So now you know," he said, his voice raspy. "I suppose you hate me." "Hate you?" Mia's voice broke. "I don't know what to feel. All my life you told me you and Mom had this perfect love, but you stole her. You lied to her. You lied to me. You were so jealous of what she had with him that you manipulated her into staying." The accusations hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Robert didn't deny them. He just absorbed them, his shoulders slumping under their weight. "Is that what he told you?" he asked quietly. "That I was the jealous one? That I poisoned her against him?" "He said he was going to New York, that he wanted to build a life with her, and you convinced her to choose you instead, to choose a safe life over a life of passion." He said she broke his heart. Robert was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on a worn spot on the carpet. Mia's anger began to curdle into a confusing mix of pity and pain. He looked so defeated. Finally, he looked up at her, and his eyes were filled with a sorrow so profound it stunned her into silence. "He left a few things out of his story," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "He told me he loved her," Mia countered, wanting to believe the clean, tragic narrative Davenport had spun. "Oh, he loved her," Robert agreed, a bitter edge to his voice. "In his way. He loved her like he loved one of his photographs, something beautiful to be captured and possessed. He loved the idea of her, the free-spirited artist who adored him, but he didn't love the real woman, not when it mattered." He took a deep, shuddering breath, as if preparing to lift something immensely heavy. Yes, he was going to New York, and yes, he asked her to come. Eleanor was ecstatic. She started packing her paints, her canvases. She was ready to follow him anywhere, and I was heartbroken. I admit that. I loved her from the moment I met her, and I knew I was losing her. I was ready to let her go, Mia. If it made her happy, I would have watched her walk away. He paused, gathering his strength. But a week before they were supposed to leave, something happened. Eleanor found out she was pregnant. Mia's blood went cold. "Pregnant? With you," her father whispered. She was so scared but so happy. She thought it was a sign that the three of you would start your new life together. She went to tell Julian, expecting him to be thrilled. Robert's face twisted in a grimace of old remembered pain. He wasn't. A baby. A child. That wasn't part of his 5-year plan. It was a complication, an anchor that would slow him down on his climb to the top. He told her it was bad timing. He asked her if she would consider taking care of it. The euphemism hung in the air, vile and suffocating. Mia felt the floor drop out from under her. This story, this ugly, raw, and devastating story, felt more real than Davenport's polished tale of heartbreak. "He didn't want me," Mia whispered, the realization a physical blow. He didn't want anything that would get in the way of his ambition, Robert said, his voice cracking. Eleanor was shattered. The man she loved, the man she was ready to sacrifice everything for, had just told her that their child, that you were an inconvenience. She saw him for who he really was in that moment. Not a passionate artist, but a ruthless, selfish man who would let nothing stand in his way. He finally met her eyes and his were swimming with tears. She came to me that night, completely broken. She told me everything. She ended it with him the next day. She wasn't choosing me over him, Mia. She was choosing you. She was choosing to protect her child from a man who would never truly love her. And you? Mia could barely speak. I told her I'd be there for both of you, Robert said, his voice raw. I told her I would love you as my own, that I would give you my name, and that you would never, ever have to know that your biological father didn't want you. We got married 2 months later, and every single day I had with your mother was a gift, and every single day I've had with you, Mia Bear. You are the best part of my life. I'm sorry I lied. I am so sorry. I wasn't trying to hide what I did. I was trying to hide what he did. I didn't want you to carry that pain. The tears that had been threatening finally came, hot and fast. But they weren't tears of anger anymore. They were tears of overwhelming, heartbreaking gratitude. The truth was 1,000 times more painful than Davenport's lie, but it was a pain that came with a profound sense of love. Her father hadn't stolen her mother. He had saved her. He had saved them both. He hadn't lied out of jealousy. He had lied out of a fierce, protective love that had defined her entire existence. She crossed the room and fell to her knees in front of his armchair, burying her face in his lap, her sobs shaking her whole body. His calloused mechanic's hands came to rest on her head, stroking her hair just as they had when she was a little girl. I love you, Dad, she cried into the worn fabric of his jeans. I love you too, Mia Bear, he wept, more than anything. In that moment, in the dimly lit living room of the small house on Oak Street, the shattered pieces of Mia's world didn't just come back together. They were forged anew, stronger and truer than before. She knew who she was. She was the daughter of Eleanor Vance, a woman of incredible strength. And she was the daughter of Robert Evans, a man of even more incredible love. A strange calm settled over Mia in the days that followed her father's confession. The storm had passed, and in its wake was a clarity that was both painful and liberating. The $50,000 offer from Davenport no longer felt like a complex moral dilemma. It felt like a dirty, pathetic insult. It was blood money, a price tag he'd put on his own discarded conscience. She knew she couldn't let it end there. She owed it to her mother's memory, to the man who raised her, and to herself. She needed to face Julian Davenport one last time, not with the confused anger of a wrong daughter, but with the cold, hard weight of the truth. She called Arthur Lexington's office. The secretary was brisk and dismissive until Mia mentioned her name. She was put on hold immediately. A minute later, Lexington's clipped voice was on the line. Ms. Evans, I trust you've made a decision regarding Mr. Davenport's generous offer. I have, Mia said, her voice steady and clear. I need to see him again, to give him my answer in person. That is highly irregular. I can arrange for the transfer of funds. It's not about the money, Mia cut him off. Tell him I know the truth, the real truth. He'll know what that means. Tell him I'll be at his office tomorrow at 11. It's not a request. She hung up before he could reply. The next morning, she didn't wait for a town car. She took the early train into the city, paying for the ticket with the last of her tip money. Walking through the opulent lobby of the Davenport Tower, she no longer felt intimidated. The marble and chrome were just things, cold and lifeless. She knew the secret rot at the heart of this empire. This time, she wasn't made to wait. Lexington met her at the elevator and escorted her straight to the massive oak doors, his expression a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Julian Davenport was standing by the great window, looking down at the city he owned. He turned as she entered. If he was surprised by her audacity, he didn't show it. Lexington said you had my answer, he said, his voice flat. I do, Mia replied, walking to the center of the room. She felt no fear, only a righteous certainty. I spoke with my father, Robert Evans. A flicker of something, unease perhaps, crossed Davenport's face. I'm sure he had his own version of events. He had the truth, Mia said calmly. He told me about the pregnancy. He told me you wanted my mother to take care of it. The color drained from Davenport's face. The carefully constructed facade of the tragically wronged lover crumbled into dust, revealing the pinched, hollow-eyed man beneath. He looked away from her, back toward the window, his jaw tight. She was never supposed to tell anyone, he muttered, more to himself than to her. But she did, Mia pressed on, her voice ringing with the clarity of her conviction. She told the man who actually loved her, the man who was willing to love her child, too. You didn't lose her to a jealous rival, Mr. Davenport. You threw her away. You threw us away. You looked at your own child, your own daughter, and you saw an inconvenience, an obstacle on your path to all this. She swept her arm around, indicating the office, the view, the empire. My mother didn't choose a safe life. She chose a brave one. She chose to be a mother on her own, rather than be with a man who was a coward. The word coward struck him like a physical blow. He turned from the window, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and shame. You don't understand. I was young. I had nothing. I was on the cusp of everything I'd ever worked for. It would have ruined me. No, Mia said, shaking her head with a sad finality. It would have made you a man. Instead, you chose to become a king, ruling over an empty kingdom. You've spent 25 years staring at that photograph, telling yourself a sad, romantic story so you wouldn't have to face the ugly truth. You weren't heartbroken. You were relieved. Every word was a nail in the coffin of his self-deception. He staggered back and sank into one of the leather chairs, the fight completely gone from him. He looked like what he was, an old, desperately lonely man, haunted by the ghost of a choice he'd made a lifetime ago. The photograph in his wallet wasn't a token of lost love. It was a penance, a constant daily reminder of his monumental failure as a human being. What do you want? He finally whispered, his voice hoarse. Money? Acknowledgement? Do you want to tell the world? Mia looked at the broken man before her, and for a fleeting moment, she felt a sliver of pity. He had everything, and he had nothing. I want you to know that your $50,000 is an insult to the memory of a woman who was priceless. I want you to know that Robert Evans, the man you dismissed as a simple mechanic, is 10 times the man you will ever be. He gave me a life filled with love, something your money could never buy. She walked over to the table and looked him directly in the eye. And I want you to know that I don't need anything from you. I don't want your name. I don't want your fortune. And I don't want your acknowledgement. Finding out you were my biological father isn't a shocking revelation. It's a disappointment. I already have a dad, and you're not him. She turned and walked toward the door, her footsteps echoing in the vast, silent office. Her hand was on the doorknob when he spoke again, his voice small and cracked. Eleanor, did she ever talk about me? Mia paused, her back still to him. She thought of her father's stories, of the lullabies her mother used to sing, of the lavender scent that was her only memory. She had been surrounded by Eleanor's love, a love that Julian Davenport had no part in. No, she said softly. She never mentioned you at all. She walked out the door, leaving Julian Davenport alone with his billions, his regrets, and the crushing weight of the truth. The train ride home was different. The world outside the window seemed brighter, the colors more vivid. Mia felt lighter than she had in years. The missing piece of her life's puzzle hadn't been a wealthy secret father. It had been the truth. And the truth, as painful as it was, had set her free. When she walked into her father's house that evening, he was in the kitchen making his famously lumpy mashed potatoes for dinner. He looked up, his face etched with worry. It's okay, Dad, she said, a real, genuine smile spreading across her face. It's all okay. She didn't need to tell him the details. He saw it in her eyes. The burden they had both been carrying in different ways was gone. That night they ate dinner and talked for hours. For the first time, her father spoke freely of Eleanor, not as a sainted, tragic figure, but as a real person. He told Mia about her mother's terrible singing voice, her obsession with bad mystery novels, the way she would laugh so hard she'd snort. He filled in the gaps, painting a portrait of a woman who was funny and flawed and wonderfully, beautifully human. He gave Mia back her mother. A week later, Mia was back at the Gilded Spoon, tying on her apron. The diner didn't feel like a prison anymore. It was just a job, a means to an end. Her life was not defined by its walls. It was defined by love, truth, and the strength she had found within herself. A package arrived for her at the diner a few days later. It was a thick, formal envelope with the Davenport Industries logo embossed in the corner. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, there was no letter, no apology, just a single official-looking document. It was the deed to a small art gallery in Soho, fully funded and endowed in perpetuity. It was to be named the Eleanor Vance Gallery for Emerging Artists. A second document established a multi-million-dollar scholarship fund in her mother's name at Syracuse University, designed to support young, struggling artists. All of it was to be managed by a board of trustees with a permanent, salaried seat reserved for Mia Evans, should she choose to accept it. It wasn't an apology, it was an act of atonement, a desperate public attempt to rewrite his own legacy. It was Julian Davenport, the only way he knew how, trying to buy back a piece of his soul. Mia looked at the documents for a long time. She thought about the life it could give her, a life of art and purpose, a life away from tired feet and coffee stains. But she also saw the invisible strings attached, the connection to a man she wanted no part of. She put the documents back in the envelope. She might accept the position one day. She might use his guilt-ridden money to do some good in the world, to honor her mother's true passion, but not yet. For now, she needed to be just Mia Evans, daughter of Robert the mechanic and Eleanor the painter. She looked around the bustling diner, at the simple, honest humanity of it all. She picked up a fresh pot of coffee and walked toward a table of hungry truckers. "More coffee, gentlemen?" she asked, her voice clear and her smile bright. She was a waitress. She was a daughter. She was the keeper of her mother's true story, and for the first time in her life, she was completely, unequivocally whole. Mia's story isn't about a poor girl finding out she has a rich father. It's about a young woman who thought she was searching for a lost inheritance, only to discover that her true wealth was the love and sacrifice she'd had all along. She faced a billionaire titan not to claim a fortune, but to reclaim her own history. The truth didn't lead her to a mansion on Park Avenue, but back to a small house on Oak Street, to the arms of the man who had always been her true parent. It's a powerful reminder that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who loves us enough to protect us, even with a lie. If Mia's incredible journey for the truth moved you and reminded you of the power of love and family, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that touch the heart. And we want to hear from you. What would you have done with the gallery and the scholarship fund? Let us know in the comments below.